definitely, definitely, the approach, right? How do we approach it? If we want to do it, how do we approach it? And what's gonna, I mean, what, basically piggyback on what you're saying, Chris. But, you know, how do we take a look at that? Who on board here that might have those resources? Do you outsource them? Do you, find some, CBO in the county or this and that and the other? So I think that, if it's definitely, something we moving forward on, then we need to talk about how we're gonna approach facilitation of healing circles.
I know one thing that came up at the meeting at large when we were talking about having healing circles in Antioch or throughout the county was also discussing what is the county's general involvement in this and how can we recommend to the county to help support either by sponsoring or funding, because some of the groups are already like hosting healing circles. Like I just was made aware of one before I got here happening on July 15th. I don't have all the details, but I do know Contra Costa is helping organize that as part of the series. But it's also just thinking like, how are we supporting efforts like that are already have been happening in the community and potentially expanding that? And part of that support too is, are we leveraging any of our county resources that could potentially support those efforts? So it's not just coming from not on the back of the CBOs, but the county's help too was part of the discussion. And I don't know, like, if that's something that we need to like recommend to the racial justice oversight body as a whole to discuss, so we can make a recommendation to the county about doing it, or if we should be reaching out to organizations first and identifying which ones are willing to do it and just have like a package ready to go or something like that. But I do think that if there are efforts happening already, be good to see what we can do to support or what we can do to support future efforts. And how are we helping create those organically too, and not just leaving it on the back of CBOs who are in the frontline communities handling this already.
Yeah, also too, to pick the brain of those who've even done it. So might be it's a little research, see if we can extract a little research from them and just like, hey, how are those healing circles going? Right. So if somebody's already doing this and it's existing as we speak, then it's a good opportunity to ask them, get some feedback as to they can share about their experience guiding those healing circles. I don't know if it's been, extensive or how long it's been that they've been doing it. But if it's been a few times, we might can get some kind of temperature check on how it's going. Well, before we even get started, or as we're trying to get started, so it'd be helpful.
Yeah. And I guess the other comment I'll say on that is we're doing that temperature check too, and not just asking them how it's going, but how can this body or the county show its support for those efforts too? But I guess just more of a technical and process question for me, just because I'm new to this specific process, is just want to get understanding like what the process is to like start going about it. Like, should we as individual members do that homework and report back later, or work with staff? Like, how would that process work out for this subcommittee and the body in general?
Yeah, so you certainly can work with staff in terms of researching what might be out there. Chris has been very helpful. I think we had connected with the co-chairs about whether or not they have heard anything that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So that way we can kind of get a sense of when activities are taking place that we could potentially share out with the rest of the body. As you know, GP Crowder, who's one of the members, both of this subcommittee and obviously of the full body, has shared info that we were able to share out with the members of the body regarding virtual healing. Was it a forum or something to that effect? So, but I did see someone's hand was raised here, so maybe there's quite a few folks, as you see, that are joining virtually, members of the public. Maybe folks that have tuned in now may have some sense of other activities that are happening countywide.
Yeah, also, let me just ask another technical question. I know this is just a subcommittee, but folks in participate in the subcommittee from the public, they can just be called on too. It doesn't just need to be the.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. Yeah, as chair, yeah, you're more than welcome.
Okay, yeah.
I see some folks here. Want to go ahead and open it up if folks have any comments or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like Kimberly Glendo had her hand up earlier.
Yeah, thank you. Melvin, I have a question. This is my first meeting. So I'm kind of, I understand it was regarding the Antioch police. So what is the goal? Are you all trying to have like a community gathering, or I'm kind of just a little bit lost on this conversation? If I can get a little bit of back content on it.
Yeah, we had a special meeting that happened last month for the racial justice oversight body as a whole. Special meeting was primarily approving a letter announcing the actions of what's happening with the Antioch Police Department and making a stance on it. And that conversation led to us talking about having community healing circles or virtual community healing circles, just examining the testimonies and pain of what people felt are feeling in Antioch in general, or just around policing and as a whole. So the conversation got kicked to the subcommittee for us just to discuss further, like what should that look like? What is the county's involvement? And now just advancing to supporting efforts that are already happening, existing, and figuring out the process to sound redundant support. Doug?
Yeah, Doug Leach, Multi-Faith Action Coalition and Racial Justice Coalition. So I believe that Gigi and NAMI have already conducted more than one, maybe a few sessions that could qualify for this description of healing sessions. And I believe those were all focused on the Antioch community and healing from the Antioch police texting scandal. But I do want to suggest that it would be, I think, important to the community as a whole to have at least one healing session focused on Antioch with the stamp of the Racial Justice Oversight Body on it, one that's conducted by or for the Racial Justice Oversight Body, and maybe consider having a broader focus healing session that isn't just about the Antioch police scandal, and it's a more broad topics allowed to be more broadly offered where people are still seeking healing. Just a suggestion.
I'm starting to get a good picture myself of what that could potentially look like. So I think that's a good suggestion, like just having one that's sponsored by this oversight body, and then figuring out like the agenda and formatting for it, but have the main draw is this happened in our county. We know it could be happening and showing itself in other areas of our county. How are you impacted and what kind of support are you looking for? And then figure out like a structure facilitation for that broader discussion. Are there any other comments or impressions on this topic or ideas that folks would like to share on this body hosting its own healing circle event?
I would just say, I think that facilitation part is going to be really important. I think just because, you know, with absolutely no shade, I think just because we might, you know, folks might be appointed to, you know, the body in some way doesn't necessarily mean that the knowledge, skills, and experience that would allow a person to manage, you know, all of the feelings, all of the energy, all of the content that may come out in that space is there, right? Just within the group itself. So making sure that, you know, the right individuals or groups, you know, to really support that, you know, are present and able to be involved. And I think that also goes a long way toward, you know, centering healing, right? Which is what I keep hearing in terms of how people reference this, right? As opposed to it just being like another listening session, right? We've had those before. So I think there's a need for clarity on, do we just want people to talk about things that they've been through? We've had feedback in the past. It's been a while now, but in the past, right? Who have, you know, sort of lifted that as community members, they might be a little fatigued, you know, from showing up and always saying how they've been hurt or how they feel and what is anybody going to do about how they feel. So, right. Just making sure that we understand, and that I think is also like just part of prep work with, say, someone who is, you know, well equipped to help move this. What's the difference between like a listening session versus, you know, something that's going to center healing? How are we going to set the stage for that? How are we going to hold space for people to at least begin to do some healing versus just some sharing, and making sure that, you know, within that session as well, like as that session begins, folks are there and able to handle or hold whatever comes out. So just wanted to flag that.
Did you have something else?
Well, I was gonna say too, yeah, the other component too would be restoration, right? So the healing part is probably initial at first. But with that particular incident and situation, then you have to restore restoration of trust, which is, you know, people gotta live in the city, right? With the same, you know, for police force or whatever. With half of the police force gone now, hoping that you're still safe with half of a, you know, I don't know what you want to call it, but that is probably in the minds of folks too. You know, the healing part is probably going to get you to a place where you can start trying to restore, and that's why I think it is significant. It's important because you're asking folks to trust a system that has failed, right? And that's not like it's not doable, but it is definitely has to be on the agenda and on the table too, that, you know, we need folks to heal from what's happened, but then also too, we're trying to restore confidence in people to trust the folks to protect and serve per se. Another like component or another, you know, another angle.
Stephanie?
We have a hand raised and then a question in the Q&A section as well.
I was going to go to Stephanie, then the Q&A question.
Yes, that's good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. I guess I just wanted to suggest that after I attended 2 healing events in Antioch, and one was at the Bay Church. I'm sorry, I haven't gone back into my notes. But I believe it was organized by ACE members. And then I went to another one, I believe at Genesis Church, and that centered around the youth and how the youth felt. And so I think it would be really helpful to maybe reach out to those 2 organizations that organized those, and they were both well attended, and ask those individuals what maybe they would, what they think would be helpful next. I heard somebody earlier say restoration of trust, I think is really important. And I think there's a certain amount of work that needs to be done before that happens. And I definitely think that's a way that the county can hold some responsibility and with doing that. At the second event, there were a lot of youth, high school students and middle school students that spoke. And you know, the school year was just ending. The school year was just kind of coming to an end, but many of them feel very uncomfortable being back on campus with police officers. And they also said that many, you know, some of them had teachers that when they tried to discuss this with the teachers, they didn't believe that it was this bad. So anyway, I just offer that as information and as feedback.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. Ms. Kimmy, what's the question in the chat?
Yes, it is. Could we possibly have a healing circle for those affected by the racist and corrupt conduct of the sheriff's department, including but not limited to their treatment of undocumented immigrants?
I would say yes, just off the top of my head. It's all obvious. It's gonna do that planning on what the circle should look like, and also should we have one? Should we have two? Should we have three that are just kind of spread out and sprinkled through the rest of the year? And who needs to be at the table? Are there any other comments or impressions from folks who haven't spoken yet on Zoom or things that haven't been said yet? Okay, so I think we're at this point now where we do need to just follow up and do a little bit more research on what the needs are. I think just the thing that is critical, at least this is just my personal impression from the last quarterly special meeting, was that we don't want this to be something that's only on the backs of CBOs or folks who are already doing like community-based work in the cities that they're operating in, but that the county should take some sort of involvement, even if that's collaborating and co-sponsoring event or helping support with renting the space or funding, whatever it is, like have the county be involved in that. And we can also get feedback from groups doing healing circles, and just like in the chat too, on the type of healing spaces we need and what type of facilitator we should be inviting in to help host that. So we can have that folks in that expertise area, like Chris was saying, to like manage like what folks are going through and being able to drive and move the conversation forward as well. And I would also just comment on the comment of just, yeah, this should be a healing circle, not necessarily a listening session, but you know, part of healing is also going to be listening too, but the focus should be healing and how are we moving forward and how are we supporting folks that are impacted in these communities moving forward, so they're not just showing up to another meeting and feeling like, I just attended a meeting, cool, now what? And that could come from community partners that can help facilitate that ongoing follow-up too, and keep us in contact with the county. So sounds like we need to do more, just like a little bit of research and just tease out a blueprint and bring it to this body just to work out a bit more, maybe put some dates or plans and motions on how that looks like, if that's something we still want to do, or if we just want to support efforts that are already happening out there with that are already happening in terms of healing circles.
It sounds like
Go ahead.
you might be coming to the coming to closing this topic. So Carol did share that for many people, it would not be restoration of trust, but the establishment of trust in the first place, because you can't restore trust in the place that many never had. Just want to share that.
So I'll do a final call and check in before we move off of this topic. Anybody on Zoom or in a room have like a comment, question, or impression they would like to share?
Yeah, I will just share based on the last one of the later comments that we got around you know, I guess immigration, right? Immigration rights and folks who have you know, been mistreated in some way or have been made to feel marginalized or compromised in that regard. Because of the spaces that we've talked about that exist, seem like they haven't covered that, you know, which is, I think, why that may have been requested specifically. It seems like, you know, there may be the opportunity to do sort of a hybrid approach, right? There may be spaces where we can support work that's already being done, but there may be gaps where there's a need still for, you know, this body to develop you know, partnerships to hold space for folks who are not being served in those other currently existing spaces as well. So just wanted to lift that.
Yeah, and I even reflecting on that comment too, like one idea for a community healing space is potentially just having an overall topic like we're healing because of, you know, being on the negative end of law enforcement. That's why we're here. There could be examples, but also just kind of breakout groups where people can go to the topic that, you know, impacts them. It could be broken down by class, race, the region that you're living in, whether you're documented or not, but obviously want to maintain people's confidentiality if they're afraid of that information being public, but just giving folks different options that they can go to that speaks more to them and their experience. And just have an overall form, and also just making sure that if we're doing a breakout room approach, that we're focusing on the breakout groups itself and not like any other meeting where we're just rushing to breakout groups to wrap up so they can come to the main group, but actually make the focus like this is just the primary staging area, but the real work is happening in the areas of interest for you, or real healing, not work.
So if I could add one other thing to that, just in terms of logistics, depending on how, especially for a healing session to be hosted by the R job, depending on how you would want it formatted, given our current, obviously, meeting guidelines. You may want to, you know, once we start talking about, you know, breakout groups, things like that, that might get a little tricky, especially with tech and audio, to make sure that folks who are joining in from the public can adequately hear. But it may also be worth it to consider getting maybe feedback from a healing circle facilitator to let us know what is the most appropriate format for hosting a healing session, considering the sensitivity of the things that will come up, emotions that will come up, and how best to navigate and move folks through it. Because if the center point is really based on healing, then that means that there's going to be some pain felt in that process, right? And will be expressed and will need to be held. And so that juxtapose having it being a public format for that may want to consider how those participating in that might how they may be dealing with that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I don't know if I'm coming across clear enough, but just want to highlight that.
Yeah, no, people are gonna be impacted in different ways. Yeah, hand from Kimberly?
Yeah, thank you, Melvin. So if we do decide to go with the healing sessions, is there gonna be a goal that we want? Like, do we want sheriff accountability, more sheriff transparency? Because with the Sheriff Livingston, he hasn't been very transparent in the past in regards to, I can only speak on immigration issues in regards to like ICE transfers, ICE notifications, etc. So I love the idea of healing sessions and coming together as a community, but if we could figure out like a goal on what we want to come out of it, so then there's something tangible that is done through it. I think that could be something that we can also do and look forward to. But that's just an idea I'm just throwing out there for more sheriff accountability and sheriff transparency from community members, not from the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, that's actually gonna be an item on our agenda next too. So let's bring that back up to then. To that, and yeah, I agree too, because I know when I do door-to-door work, what I'm usually doing is I'm not only asking like, hey, what's the problem, but it's a series of questions like, okay, how long have you been here? How long has this problem been persisting? What have you done to address this problem? And how is it overall impacting you and your family and your livelihood? So just kind of running through all of those like questions, and then part of the other half of that too is asking the community members like, hey, what is your solution? Like, what would you like to see done, be changed, and like really getting that feedback from a solution oriented lens and figuring out strategies on a pathway forward to meet that solution. So I think, just going back to what you were saying, that we definitely need to just talk to the folks in the healing circle arena and those who are already doing this, just to get some technical assistance and advice. But I think, near the end of the session, once folks have had that chance to heal, just allow an opportunity to give feedback on solutions that you think would help benefit you based on what you just experienced and shared. Carol?
Yeah, I was just gonna agree 100% with that, and because this whole all of the efforts for the sheriff oversight and the board of supervisors, they're just not willing to cooperate. It's been really, really frustrating. So we can keep on trying to get some kind of oversight, and in the meantime, keep having these healing circles, because like you just said, Melvin, the people who are going through or who have already been through some struggles, they can give a lot of feedback and support for people who are currently going through what they somehow managed to overcome. And it's a good place for people to just share, so they don't feel like they're all alone and they have no help or anything from anybody, and it's that much more frustrating. But having a place to come where people can help them with legal services or other types of resources that in the meantime, while we're trying to figure out how to get the sheriff to do right and the board of supervisors, and yeah.
Thank you. All right, and we're starting to go into the sheriff oversight discussion a bit now. But before we move on to that next part of the agenda, I am gonna call for a final question or comment on the healing circles. This is gonna be a topic to follow up on and basically report back with more details so we can have a clear idea of the plan and what we wanna do and when we wanna do it. But in the meantime, final thoughts, impressions, or ideas on the best way to go about the healing circles.
Just one question for me, and that is, do we feel like we have identified enough, people or organizations to reach out to in terms of that follow-up. Because I hear us saying, let's reach out to people in the space or people who have experience. I think we're all agreed that we need to do that. I think it may be easier if we can, identify who some of those people may be. If we don't do that, then we very well may have the same conversation next month. And I know that none of us wants to do that. So I want to make sure, that we have some sense. And I know we usually come back to like next steps at the end, so that's fine. If we need to ruminate on it a bit, I just want to make sure we have a sense of who we're going to, to try to get some information, some feedback, and just to do some of that research so that we're not just kind of generally saying that's something we're going to do and then kind of leaving it undone.
Yeah. The first folks that was gonna come to mind is the folks who've already done work so far and continuing to do work. So I know I'm a part of ACE. I can have a more focused conversation on what those town hall meetings have been like, because I haven't been able to be there in Antioch personally to see. And then also reaching out to NAMI Contra Costa too. And just getting their feedback on not only how the healing circles are, but best ways that the county could support or organize their own. And I also did want to reach out to folks like ACLU too, just to see what, because they handle a lot of these kinds of issues, just seeing if they have any resources or good people that we could talk to and just work with the groups that I just mentioned, which is only a couple, and just see if they can identify a lot of folks in these spaces too that we can also talk and engage with. Because I'm not from there's this one organization in Oakland I know does work out here.
Talk about RJoy.
Boy, what's that stand?
That's restorative justice for Oakland youth, the only one program that I'm personally familiar with that does healing circles and restorative justice work. And I know they do training. So the only question I would have is about the facilitation, like you were just mentioning, because that's really important, like I think somebody else brought up. So maybe finding out what happened at the NAMI events and at the church events and who facilitated those. But if we need professional, which I think we do, professional help in facilitation and sort of expertise, that's one organization that I'm familiar with that's been around for a long time doing this kind of stuff. I think before it was more well-known and sort of trendy. So we might be able to get some guidance from them or figure out if they can train or lead or something of the sort.
So RJoy too. I see some hands raised up. So Stephanie and Jane, y'all had a comment or suggestion of groups to reach?
Yeah, and I would reach out. I believe it was Genesis Church. They have a large youth group, and there was really an emphasis on the youth that evening. And they actually brought in Dr. Stephen Ford and talked to him. So I think that would be a group to reach out to, and that way you're approaching the youth piece in Antioch.
Thank you, Stephanie. Jane?
Oh, I was going to recommend Ahimsa. Do you know about Ahimsa? In the Ahimsa Collective, they've been doing restorative justice. I think they started largely with reentry and doing lots of restorative justice with prisoners and victim offender dialogues, but they definitely would be very skillful, it seems to me, in healing circles. You can just see them. I'll put it in the chat because it's if you're not familiar with them, spelling it is a little tricky. But they have been around for quite a while, and they work throughout California, but they do definitely have a Bay Area. I know they have a reentry house in Oakland, but they also have a presence in the East Bay. So just another idea, just not that it's directly related to Antioch, unfortunately, but just as a resource for conducting this kind of circle.
Thank you. Yeah, please put that in the chat, the name of the organization. Stephanie, you raised your hand again?
Yes, I did. I'm sorry. I don't want to, I just, in somebody talking about restorative justice, I just thought of SEEDS. I don't know if anybody's heard of SEEDS or is familiar with them. I believe they're out of either Oakland or Berkeley. I did a restorative justice training about 10 years ago, and they might be a resource as well. SEEDS, SEEDS.
We've, our organization used them in the past. They're pretty good. They're pretty good. I like their approach. They're different. They have a different holistic type approach. So it could be something else too. If somebody wanted a different variety of how they too. So I think C's would be interesting. And then you know, we provide clinical services to everybody in the county. And we do also do healing circles and substance abuse, but we have a clinician on staff that also probably not only could talk to him, but also find out if he has other recommendations, other organizations that may be suitable as well. He might have a, you know, handful of organizations to recommend as well. So I'll touch base with him and have a report on that. Well, and I'm also going to attend a NAACP chief of police, city of Antioch meeting tonight at 6:30. So it's a town hall. So I'll be going to that as well. I'll find out what they're just talking about as well. So.
And it brings up a question for me, just if it's one thing also on top of hosting the Healing Circle event, like you were saying, your organized, what's the name of your organization?
It's a Health Right 360. It's a, you know, it's we started off doing substance abuse in San Francisco in '69. So substance abuse is at the core of our organization. We also partnered with Haight-Ashbury Free Clinics in San Francisco, which their approach is that everybody has a right to free healthcare. So, you know, organic healthcare, healing, inclusion, all that kind of stuff is kind of like where we live. So we probably have some resources there too. I'll definitely be trying to find out what I can provide and produce on that end, just so it'll be available.
Yeah, thank you. Because that made me wonder if like if we should also just be having a conversation with the county health department, just saying like, hey, what resources can you offer public that are experiencing trauma, not necessarily in the middle of a crisis, but experiencing trauma on an ongoing basis as a way to like support those folks too. And if our county health department has those services, then they need to be a part of that conversation. I hope they would be a part of that conversation. I'm not going to dictate it to anybody.
Should be in the loop.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I'm sure they should.
And part of me wants to say also the Burns Institute, even though I feel like I'm wrong. And there's a couple of organizations based in Oakland that work on addressing mass incarceration, but they don't just center it in Oakland. It's more of like a regional effort that they're doing. And I'm just gonna throw Safe Returns name in there too, because they work with those who are previously incarcerated. So there's a lot of folks that I've heard give testimony about their experience while they were incarcerated and with our sheriff's department and other folks. And it's not the most glowing reviews, I will say. So it'd be worth like reaching out to those who were previously incarcerated too, and in those spaces to also have that as an outlet for them as well, and getting those groups' impressions on what the healing circle should look like and best approaches to go about it.
Our other member, Marcus Walton, is here.
So sorry, Marcus, how it going? Did you want to say hi real quick?
Hi, Marcus Walton. Sorry, I'm late. Good to see everyone, especially in person.
Yeah. So we were just talking about building off the conversation we had in our special meeting with the healing circles and seeing how the county can support either potentially co-supporting healing circles that are happening or hosting its own as a racial justice oversight body, potential facilitators that we could identify, so it's not just falling on individual members of this body to take on the responsibility, and also the logistics on if this is hosted by the racial justice oversight body, making sure that it's properly noticed to the public and that we have the technical assistance, and just identifying groups that we could invite, partner with to be a part of the event, and also have that follow-up for people. So it's not just a one and done thing. Did you have any impression or comments you want to share too about healing circles, or what do you think?
I don't. I need to catch up on what was discussed earlier, but no.
Okay. So we definitely have some next steps, and I can offer to Chris and everybody else offline on homework I need to do to help support reaching out to some of these groups and having a conversation. And so we have something to build off of at our next meeting. Chris, I seen you come off of mute.
Yep, just to say, you named a lot of things. So don't be afraid to delegate. You have other people on the subcommittee for a reason, right? You have, also, support from myself and the ORJ, you know what I mean? So like, don't feel like you have to do all of that. If there are relationships that you just really have in the bag, you should start there. If there are places where it's going to be more of a cold call kind of situation, maybe you could, see who else might have the capacity to take some of that on, because I think for you to reach out to like 5, 6, 7 different organizations or something like that will, the next meeting, not because you're not great and you wouldn't be trying, but we'd be at the next meeting and it wouldn't be done, just because realistically that is a lot for one person to hold. So make sure you're utilizing your resources in light of, in the way of subcommittee members as well as us.
Thank you. I'm just still on that learning curve on what's the appropriate ask for county staff and subcommittee members. Like, I'm not just trying to say, hey, you do this, and I ain't got the authority to do it. So just still getting warmed up to it, the position of being the chair for the subcommittee is all. But thank you. And part of that offline conversation is just me asking, so what can you help me with, and what do I need to do on my own?
You just got marching orders from Chris, so Chris,
Yeah,
you can't.
All right, I know we got 27 minutes till the conclusion of this, so I at least wanna, if there are no objections, I do want to move into the next part of the agenda, which is a review of the Contra Costa Sheriff's quarterly report. So for those who have the agenda packet, it's attachment 3. And this was a report from, if I'm understanding correctly, this was a report that was given by our Sheriff's Department at the April 19th or April 20th meeting of the Board of Supervisors. It was something that the Board of Supervisors adopted before the end of last year in response to, I was one of the community members with many folks calling for community oversight of the Sheriff's Department. And this is the model the Board of Supervisors adopted, which was giving a quarterly report of the activities of the Sheriff's Department. And just what they've been up to in general, and then there's opportunities to get public comment on that. And I know this got agendized for today because at our first quarterly meeting of the year, or at least my first quarterly meeting of the year, we, while discussing Antioch, folks were interested in resurrecting this conversation about recommending to the Board of Supervisors for the need to have a community sheriff oversight board. And just moving forward on that, because we've heard that there hasn't necessarily been the political will to do it in the past, but given what's happened last year, this year, it's felt appropriate to have another discussion about it and get impressions from members of the public, subcommittee members on this idea of sheriff oversight and recommending it to the Board of Supervisors again. So I guess for the overall ask for the discussion, and folks can raise their hands just so we could talk about it a little bit more, is if you were there at the Board of Supervisors meeting or had a chance to look at the quarterly report before this meeting, what are your overall impressions? Do you think that this is sufficient enough? What kind of sheriff oversight would you like to see? How should we recommend this to the Board of Supervisors, or just any thoughts or impressions that you have in general? And we already started talking about healing just in the undocumented community of folks who've been experiencing negative impacts from their interactions with the sheriff. So that is something that has come up. And outside of public comment, I don't know how community members would be able to comment or dive deeper on individual issues like that unless there's a process in place to do so. So I will open up the floor for any impressions on the review of Contra Costa Sheriff's Oversight Quarterly Report. Doug?
Yeah, thanks. So I was there at the Board of Supervisors meeting in April when the sheriff gave this quarterly report. And I was concerned that this report would be just a one-way communication, and it largely was, but I do want to give the board, the supervisors credit for taking some considerable amount of time to ask the sheriff questions of their own, the supervisors. Ask the sheriff question and ask him to do something a little different the next time to make it more effective. So I'm giving credit there. But one of the key weaknesses of this approach is that the public is only limited to the standard public comment that they have during a Board of Supervisors meeting, which is like 2 minutes. And there's no obligation by either the supervisors or the sheriff to respond to any of those public comments. That's the standard for public meetings. So that's a key shortcoming. So it's clear that this is not really the equivalent of an independent oversight of the sheriff. When the Board of Supervisors decided to start doing this, it was in direct response to the racial justice oversight body's request to the supervisors. This is dating back to, I think, August 2021. The racial justice oversight body recommended that revised an earlier recommendation that there be an independent sheriff oversight body. And the supervisors basically decided, no, we don't want to do that. We think we can do it ourselves. So the supervisors are taking the view that they can be the oversight body for the sheriffs. And from the point of view of the community, I think that isn't acceptable. And I would submit that from the point of view of the racial justice oversight body, as it was constituted back in August 2021, it isn't acceptable either. I don't believe this is what the Racial Justice Oversight Body had in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Jane?
Yeah, I'm, as I often do, I'm echoing a lot of what Doug said. I was also, I was at that first meeting when this decision was made to basically have quarterly reports. And while I appreciate that they may have asked a few questions, there is still a kind of absurdity in overseeing yourself, which basically is what is happening in that department. We heard back in the initial recommendation of the original Racial Justice Task Force, no, we cannot do this because legally there's no subpoena power. And as I'm sure you have discussed, that has changed. There is state law that now indicates that in fact, these kinds of bodies are very legal. And we have a model, certainly LA, not perfect, but it's gotten started there. So and I have heard some scuttlebutt, maybe more than scuttlebutt, that one of the newest supervisors, let's just get it out there, is actually agreeable to look at that model. And I've been on their website trying to find out a little more about, who are these people who are, they give lots of transparent information as to who's on the body. Ours would obviously look different. But I do think this, if anything, is the territory of the Racial Justice Oversight Board. It is that we have some true oversight in the department where the inequities are what created the task force to begin with. Yeah, as a community member who's followed this for some years, not as many as some, but for some years, I would really hope that that's something that is going to come out of this latest year of oversight board meetings. Thanks.
Thank you, Jane. Any other comments from Chris?
Yep. Just want to thank both Doug and Jane for all of the context that they gave. The only thing that I would add is, right, if you look at the quarterly report, and I appreciate the context that maybe that report is going to change, right? It's going to be updated, and maybe there will be sort of more components to it, or additional components to it from maybe even what we have in this agenda. It's all pretty general information. And if you look at the task force recommendation that we, basically sought to bring back from the dead back in 2021, it was also getting at grievances, right? Like specifically, like folks being able to address grievances with, with the sheriff's office, which you just could not accomplish in a report. In fact, there's not even any real information about grievances that may have been, filed, or, complaints that may have been made. There's reference to complaints, but those complaints seem to be, complaints that were filed against citizens that the sheriff's office was implicated in responding to, right? More so than any sort of grievances or complaints that anyone had with the sheriff's office, and those being addressed in some meaningful way. And so I think that was part of, and is part of, what folks are trying to accomplish. Not the only thing necessarily, but one of the things that folks are trying to accomplish with civilian oversight of the sheriff, and it couldn't be accomplished that way. So I really appreciate you, Melvin, because this was your idea. I just want to give you your credit. You were the person who said, maybe we should look at that, and then, be able to say in a report, speak to why this doesn't amount to what we're looking for, or why this does not suffice. It is mostly obvious, but I still think spelling it out in some way in a report or something like that, and then, you know, using it to bolster that that claim or that request, that recommendation that folks have stated, you know, certainly community has stated, as well as members of the body have stated, in light of recent events that you want to reinstate, may you know, just at least make the claim stronger, right? We can't speak to necessarily what will happen you know, once the recommendation has been made, but at least being able to say, we see what you've done, we appreciate that some step was taken, but because we want to accomplish X, Y, and Z, this does not rise to the level of the accountability that we.
Yeah, I was gonna add one more thing that we did hear at the special meeting, a presentation from Center for Policing Equity that also lifted up what they have seen in different jurisdictions when they've applied, and they spoke of it generally, a citizen oversight body of police departments or law enforcement agencies, and some of the potential pitfalls that you may encounter when you go down that road. So I would say that in whatever frame that this body is seeking to accomplish through oversight, like what is it that you're really trying to get at, that though that it's imperative to have that be incredibly defined, so that you can articulate that, and whether that be you want additional information that needs to come out of these reports, or whatever the case, however that should be framed. I think that's the key thing to do. Otherwise, you might find yourselves advocating or pushing for a certain strategy that will also result in some mixed results as well. So just some things to lift up there.
Yeah, and you already stole my comment, Chris, before I even had a chance to say it. There's nothing on here that says anything about community members' interactions with sheriff's department in a negative context or negative way, and how people are able to like going about remedying that or getting that addressed so it doesn't happen again. Like, I'm looking at the self-reporting thing, and you know, just even like use of force against a tenant in 2022 or 2020. Yeah, 2022. It's like 1, or this year, use of force for tenant 1. So I'm wondering, like, what was that use of force? How was it provoked? What was everything that went into it? And all those elements, because unfortunately, I just had to pay witness to an eviction myself this year of an 80-year-old grandmother, and 4 sheriff's officers came up, and even me in the capacity that I have in Richmond, it's like if I make a wrong move, you know, everybody's on edge, it's tense. Family was in a state of confusion because that was their home for like 3 decades. They felt like they had a bunch of stuff, and the sheriffs were like, well, we're wasting time with you right now. No, you don't get to grab your bird or whatever, just grab this, get out now. We got 9 other places to hit. If you don't get out, we're gonna start taking arrests. So I'm like, family can't even grab a pet that they're afraid is gonna die the next day or something like that. There is no like sense of like working with somebody who's literally going homeless. It's just kind of like get out or else. And I didn't feel, you know, I'm not saying I didn't feel right for me personally. Other people may have a different impression on that, but it's like, is there anything that we could do that gives folks an outlet to address those kind of concerns, so we're not approaching the community in this my way or the highway approach, which the highway approach usually ends people up in custody, but more of a way that just communicates information, take care of the task at hand, and make sure that folks can walk away without any incident. And yeah, so that's just like one example that I experienced this year. And I know like in the past, Richmond had a human relations commission. They used to do tours and talked to folks in the detention facility. And then they got feedback from even those who were locked up about the retaliation that happened just for speaking on certain environmental things that were happening. I don't see how that gets reflected on this report, like how could operations be better or more humane in certain ways. I mean, in general, yeah, I personally think that we should be, as a body, recommending that we resurrect sheriff oversight again. And if the Board of Supervisors isn't willing to adopt specific models and at least have multiple types of models that we could look at, like as opposed to the self-reporting being reported at the Board of Supervisors, can it be reported to an independent community commission to look at it and ask questions, because they're just going to be there for the community, not necessarily there for other issues, supposedly. I mean, different options that we could take and just to increase transparency and get more input on the operations of the sheriff's department, especially if there is things happening in the background. Sorry for talking too long, but that's just my impression. We got 9 minutes to go. Is there anybody else like on a call who wants to say something on this topic? Stephanie?
Yeah, I also attended that meeting. And I think I was there in person. Just as general feedback, I thought it was, completely inadequate. I thought there was a real lack of transparency. And to me, it didn't seem like the aim was to help provide information to the county residents. It was kind of a little bit more of benefiting maybe the sheriff's office, trying to look good and that type of thing. And it wasn't until Ellen McDonnell presented the public defender's report, where you really felt like you were getting a picture of what was going on. And so that to me was kind of a real reality check. So I would say that this, what presently was done is just inadequate in terms of any kind of oversight.
Thank you. Carol?
So listening to this, dealing with the sheriff and hearing all of this is, again, it's really, really frustrating, especially hearing about the 80-year-old grandmother. So I'm just thinking, everybody has a boss. So what is a higher authority that we can go to get oversight for this? Since the Board of Supervisors, they're unwilling to cooperate in general, there must be a higher authority somewhere. So who would that be?
Yeah, it's the vote, it's the electoral process in general, because that's how our sheriff and DA and Board of Supervisors get elected, is through the voters, and they get a lot of discretion under their offices. So I know that in the past, there was an attorney's general report that did happen on our jails, and they released a staggering report of different conditions that they didn't agree with. But even then, there wasn't anything actionable they could do with that other than release a report on what was going on. So that's why we're here, just wanting to discuss this and see if we need to make a recommendation again, and just getting feedback on the need for sheriff oversight, or if folks feel what was here is adequate, which I haven't really heard anybody yet say that this was adequate enough presentation. But I guess my question to you, Chris, and everybody else is, where do we move forward with this discussion? Do we just want to have it as a do we want to like recommend like the feedback that we've heard to the bigger body on like, you know, the discussion that happened and then see how they want to approach that? Do folks want to like revisit this conversation at our next month meeting? Because I do understand that during the Truth Act forum this July, they're also going to be doing the second quarterly report for the sheriff's department. At least that's my understanding. And we could see if they came back with feedback that the Board of Supervisors had and just have a discussion based on the next quarterly report. Just want to see a good way, a most appropriate way to move forward with this discussion, and seeing that we have 5 minutes left on the clock.
Can I just add real quick? I remember the efforts to put this on the ballot for the voters to decide about sheriff oversight. That's another possibility.
I mean, the Board of Supervisors could always vote to put ballot initiatives on too when asked. That wouldn't be something that this body would be able to do. We could recommend to the Board of Supervisors that if they don't want to establish it themselves, then they could put a ballot initiative on a ballot together for folks to decide, or even an advisory initiative.
Yeah.
So
Hi, sorry.
it's been a bit, it's been a bit since I actually read the piece of legislation.
Mhm.
But as I recall, maybe Chris, you can clarify, I believe that the oversight body is actually an advisory body to the Board of Supervisors. So, so I just want to clarify that point, so it's not, I mean, it's to review, is that correct, Patrice, the various things can review,
With the legend,
but it's ultimately advisory to the Board of Supervisors, not.
well, that, yeah, and that's essentially what the stance that the supervisors took, was that they essentially can serve in that role as the advisory body, so to speak, when it came to sheriff oversight. Yeah.
And I do know from the discussions, they are all willing to add more points into the report. And they did take the public feedback and added more next month, certainly. I know through the entire process, they've been open to adding more points of data as requested. I haven't heard them say no to any point of data that's asked. So, so I guess as you're moving forward, to kind of think about like a and. You know, so if they're not willing to develop an oversight body, but and we would like these extra points of data,
Yeah.
you know, so it doesn't, and I think Patrice was just kind of talking about that from the CBO's perspective, is just being really clear what you're asking for.
Yeah.
I know what the ideal is,
Mhm.
but what would be the second best thing to you? You know, what points of data? I mean, you mentioned some of them, it's just kind of rushed over. Is there more points of data? I guess maybe as you're forming your recommendation, that could be established. So that way it's a whole ask.
Oh, yeah, that's helpful too. And I've said it vaguely. That's what I was thinking about too, when I'm just saying if it's not going to be one of the models of community oversight, then having 3 different ways of saying like how an oversight body could be established, which does need more discussion, but that's what I was thinking about.
And if not, then how can the
Yeah.
report be more robust?
Yeah, yeah. And that's and that was my question too, based on the previous board supervisors meeting feedback when this report was released. What's it gonna look like in July? Because I know that there was more data points being requested at that meeting to come back. So,
And just so that folks know, the Truth Act forum, I believe, is scheduled for July 18th.
mhm.
And will be where the second quarterly report will be shared. So if you don't have it yet on your calendar, add it to your calendar.
All right. Okay, it is 2:29. I did want to ask a potential quick question that we could pick up later on. Is an hour and a half enough for these meetings, or do people want to bring it to 2-hour meetings like the other subcommittees?
Well, since about June of 2021. We historically run out of time. So.
Indeed. Yeah, and additional context, that was just something that that our former chair did. You know what I mean? Like he just trying to, you know, be responsive to folks saying I'm in a bunch of Zoom meetings all the time. But there was no other reason for it. All the other subcommittees do meet for 2 hours. So you know, there was no specific underlying reason why it should have to stay at an hour and a half if folks decide that you would like that additional 30 minutes to carry these conversations forward.
I guess we're at 2:30, so we have to adjourn here, but
Well, you can try to, yeah, you can.
Agree to continue on for another 15 or 30 minutes, whatever it is you want.
Okay, cool. And we don't have to use the whole 15, 30 minutes, but are folks agreeable to continuing on for another 15, 30 minutes to wrap up these pieces of the discussion? Do you have anywhere you need to go?
Yeah, I always do. but-
I mean,
We don't want to be time specific.
okay, how about, I'm gonna just say about 10, let's extend for 10 minutes just to
We good.
wrap this up. No objections to extend for 10 minutes? Perfect. So I'm just gonna suggest off the bat that we just do we just schedule these for 2 hours for right now. And once again, we don't have to stay the whole 2 hours. If we finish early, great. If we do all our work within a 2-hour time limit, that's great too. And then we'll just, if we need to discuss like the time we're spending on items at different meetings, we can discuss that at the last 10 minutes of our meetings, just to do a quick evaluation. But let's just say for our next meeting that gets scheduled, let's have it be for a 2-hour session instead. And how does that work for county staff too? Because I know that's a thing.
No, well, I do want to direct your attention to attachment 3. So we did, this is the.
Yeah.
So did we complete the sheriff's quarterly report discussion? I know that.
Yeah, no.
I'm sorry. I just wanted us to circle back and what are our next steps with that? I know that we are going to need to talk about logistics, but are we going to bring it back? Are we going to wait for the Truth Act report and then have another discussion? I just want to make sure I need to report back to my personal proxy.
Yes, that's good.
So that she knows what's coming.
I'm gonna propose that we bring this discussion back to our next subcommittee after the Truth Act forum, just to see how the report changed from the first quarterly report to last, and build on our discussion from there, that we can make a recommendation to the entire our job about how we feel this should move forward. And if they're not willing to do oversight, what data points are we wanting to look for from those quarterly reports?
Just make us, even if they're willing to do oversight, that's going to take some time.
Yeah,
And that data, we should know whether or not they say yes or no to the oversight, that data, I think we can inform what is important to the oversight committee, or, you know, because that's, I'm going to assume that's not something that's going to happen.
overnight.
Right. And some feet will be dragged. So whether or not it happens, if we can come back and give some recommendations on the data. I know that early on in the process and during the task force days, there was a lot of data that was compiled and shared. Kiki, you probably have, I mean, the history behind some of that, and maybe we can, I don't know if staff still has some of that maybe can come back so we can look and see what data we grabbed in the past and what could be included in the sheriff's oversight report, et cetera, because some of this work's been done. And so I'd hate for us to get back and do it over again. Obviously there'll be new ideas, but if we have the past data that we've collected and utilized, let's grab that, see what's missing, what we can say we want to see, and use that to inform us as we move forward.
Is that a fire
It's
alarm?
not a fire alarm.
It's a strange.
Should we be going to our designated?
Sorry, we have an alarm going off over here, so forgive us if we're distracted.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I agree, like, any data that was already like collected, then if that could, we could figure out how that could be a part of our next like agenda packet, or just so we can have it, because I don't want to duplicate efforts either if we don't have to. I know the main point for me personally, and just my impression from our last meeting is wanting to resurrect this conversation and figure out how we move forward, because the report we had wasn't satisfying enough to folks who looked at it, and at least in my general bias sphere, didn't sound like it was good enough for some members of the R job. So yeah, which it's just about resurrecting this conversation and figuring out other pathways forward too, and getting those ideas out there so we can come up with like, here's our bottom line recommendation, but here's what we also want to see, if not our bottom line. So I agree with everything you said. Thank you.
Yeah, they were testing, so.
Oh,
So.
okay.
And it gave us a heads
It-
up.
it- it worked. For the elevators.
The elevator. I'm taking the stairs when we leave. Hey, Chris, did you have anything you wanted to add from those last few comments at all, or was that,
No, I mean, I think that's sufficient. I mean, I think, you know, based on the conversation that we're having and based on the things that people said in the quarterly meetings that we've had, I think there needs to be a renewed conversation just in light of everything that's happened in the county. But I think, you know, looking at the most recent report makes sense, as well as figuring out like how exactly to structure any response or any request or recommendation. So, you know, coming back and discussing it next month to refine what that may look like is the right step.
and any other comments from members of the public on Zoom based on the discussion we just had additionally? All right. Hearing none, then I briefly want to go to our next meeting date is scheduled for,
So, yeah,
may make sense to do it after the quarterly meeting.
well, yes. Because, well, if you look on attachment 3, so what we included for you guys was your typical meeting schedule. And typically on the second Thursday from 3 to 4:30.
Okay.
So we're doing it for 2 hours. Stretch that out to 5 p.m. However, so this meeting was rescheduled because our special meeting was like back to back. So anyway, that's why we're meeting today is today a Thursday? Yes, it is.
Yeah,
But earlier in the day. But earlier in the day. So this is an opportunity for you guys to discuss it 3 to 5. Works for you. And then also meeting location as well. Initially, it was discussed that we wanted to have some conversation around meeting logistics that could create space for more community members to be able to access pretty easily, come in and you know, feedback and what have you. But anyway, we have this space here. We can always work with the chief scheduler around scheduling this as a backup, because the main key in selecting a meeting location is that it has to have the technical capability to allow for a hybrid option. So
This is probably as far east as you can go to have that.
Far East,
No, I'm
actually,
saying, if you go any farther, you're gonna lose technology.
if we go any further east, we're gonna look
Yeah.
at technology.
I don't know.
Well, no, their district offices for the supervisors have hybrid
okay.
options as well.
Okay.
County administration.
In the count, but he's saying far east.
As far east as we can go, yeah.
Yeah.
Passing Martinez.
Oh, it's fast.
Right.
So we have a lot of options here centrally in Martinez, but if you're looking at other places, we'll need to work on that and see what's possible. But anyway, as members, because the main thing is to always maintain quorum.
Yeah, I would suggest, at least for right now, if there isn't any objections, that we just hold this location, because I don't think we want to rush through just figuring out where the next space is gonna be.
Okay.
We can pick this part of it up too about location and logistics. I am open to hearing feedback though about the best time to start at the next meeting. 1 PM, I guess for right now is fine if we don't want to have a rush discussion. Otherwise, I would be more interested in 3 to 5, just to give people more of a chance to participate if you're just getting off of work or anything like that. But what do other folks think? Should we hold this for like 1 to 3? Just for our next meeting for right now and dive into this conversation, or are folks interested in adjusting to a 3 to 5 schedule or range around there?
Traditionally, it was later, so, I mean, I know we're in a new time, but I'm just thinking about the next meeting. Because, I think there is a consensus that we want to wait until at least the 18th for the next report to come out. I noticed that our next meeting is scheduled on, well, tentatively suggested according to the old schedule on the 13th, and that the large body meeting was moved to the following Thursday, the 27th. So do we want to meet in between those 2 time periods, in between the 18th and the large body meeting?
Oh, yeah,
Because if we're sticking to a Thursday, that would mean
the 20th.
to the 20th, right?
July 20th. Yeah.
And currently, that's the meeting date for the diversion subcommittee from 1 to 3.
Or I mean, part of me wants to suggest that because we have the large body meeting, that we do cancel July, because it'll be a quick turnaround to the subcommittee large body meeting. And I was gonna suggest that we pick up our regular tentative schedule for August. I mean, yeah, 10th, yeah, August 10th, and then just keep it consistent from there. But that was gonna be my suggestion, is skip next month because of our larger meeting, and we had a special meeting last time too.
Yeah, that's what I was just pointing out as well, there's a quick sort of proximity of those 2 things happening.
Are there any objections to that? Members of the public, you're welcome to participate too.
No, I would just add that also, if something's gonna happen on the 18th and then you're gonna have a meeting on the 20th, that agenda would have already been due, so it's not like you'd be able to include, right? Like anything that you want to say about it, like if it hasn't been already entered into.
We would have been able to, we would have preemptively probably just had the
schedule,
the item on there.
Right.
Before, but there would have been no attachment, or we would have amended it to, oh, it would have already published, that's true. So we could still pull it up, yeah.
Yeah, but any like in terms of the feedback for it, like being able to actually review it and enter some feedback or offer some thought, at least in a written form, you won't be able to do. So I think it makes sense. Just in terms of getting the most bang for your buck, with having the document, everybody being able to see it, whether or not they were able to attend the meeting, and then being prepared to really discuss how this lines up with what you may want, particularly as like some sort of a compromise in the event that what the ask has been is still not met.
Yeah, and I would also request if I don't think if we're already gonna have a bigger meeting on the 27th, I don't know what's gonna be scheduled for that meeting, but I would request that if there is any feedback from the large report at the R job at the quarterly meeting, that just be recorded for our second subcommittee, just any public comment that came out about it, any suggestions that may have, tangible suggestions that may have came out, so we could just kind of work off of that discussion at the August meeting when looking at the second quarterly report too. But that would just be my suggestion, and then just also if any members of the public are interested in wanting to have that conversation sooner than August 10th to show up at the R job meeting, but then I don't know what that agenda is going to look like either for the.
Well, I know at the last
Beyond.
meeting, Cheryl did mention that she wanted to have some space to talk about Truth Forum Act and did not have that opportunity then. Because we ran out of time, but we could certainly check in with the co-chairs about at least having an item to debrief on both the Truth Act Forum and the second quarterly report. And could go from there.
Yeah, and just summary feedback of
Yeah.
like the impression of the R job quarterly meeting for the sake of our subcommittee would be helpful too, just to give us an idea on, okay, where should we build from this conversation?
Sure. Okay, so I'm hearing August 10th, or cancel the July
July.
13th. We'll come back August 10th. In this room, if available, I will have to check with the scheduler. but
Thank
we'll
you.
Work for that. And did we say 3 to 5?
Any objections to 3 to 5 from anybody in the room or on Zoom?
Got plenty of objections, but I won't.
I mean, safe space, man. It's cool. I understand. We gonna do 3 to 5, August 10th, potentially here. And let me know about your objections for future meetings. Just make sure it's.
Yeah.
And with that being said, any final comments? Meeting adjourned. Thank you for your patience with me for the first meeting. I will make sure I'm not late at the next one and I show up at the right place the first time.
You did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Bye all.